Hey, my name is Joe Grasela. I'm a current police officer, and today I get to be your host of the Hey Chaplain podcast. As you know, the Hey Chaplain podcast brings you stories and wisdom about life and law enforcement, giving support and encouragement to those who wear the badge. Today, Jared and I will discuss the first year of the podcast. Why don't we just dive right in? Hey, Chaplain.
Hi, Joe. How are you?
I'm good. You know, I'm a longtime listener of the show, and I've got a bunch of these episodes that I know I've really enjoyed. As a listener, I'm curious about your perspective as the host. Is there anything that really sticks out in your mind that you've enjoyed recording?
Like a favorite episode?
Yeah.
All right. Now, the right answer is that I love all of my children, and I love them all equally.
Do not cut any of these episodes in half.
But I probably, by the time I record my episodes, I've listened through 5, 6, 7 times probably. But the one episode that I actually have caught myself going back and listening to, and I'm listening with a big grin on my face, is the bonus episode about the worst police car.
That's a great one.
Man, I love that. I love these guys talking about something they're passionate about, and I'm hardly there at all. So it's just one cop after another telling a story.
Welding street signs in the floorboards.
Yeah, man. I can't believe I finally found someone who had actually done it. And so,
it's one of those things that as a police officer in my police department, we have heard that over and over again about guys, in the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s doing that.
Yeah.
And then it's always, guys have told me that, and I just can't imagine it. And then you hear that and you're just like, dust coming in through the car.
Oh, yeah.
All this stuff. I can't imagine driving in those conditions all the time. We complain about a car with no paint. Yeah. I can't imagine a car with no floor.
I wish with that episode I had asked more of them what their favorite cars were, because I was looking for bad car stories.
Well,
right?
They said that though. I think at one point it was like, I love it, but I hate it. I think one of them was like, worst car ever drove, Crown Vic, but the best car ever drove.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys who have a soft spot in their heart for the Crown Vic.
Just a beautiful car. It looks like a police car.
It is.
Yeah, it's slow, doesn't turn well.
Yeah, no transmission problems. There's actually a long list of things not to like.
After a year, the air conditioner no longer works. But it
does look good. It looks like a cop car should look. Yeah. Absolutely.
I bumped into a highway patrolman one time on a call, and he had just gotten a new Explorer, and he kept calling it his his mom wagon or his
minivan.
There is a grocery grabber.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh man, the cars are fantastic. I don't know if I can ever revisit that. Maybe if I get a lot of material, I could do another episode like that someday. But man, that's really close to my heart. I loved putting that show together, and I like to go back and listen to it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it was a fun one. That was a good one.
Did you have a favorite?
Same thing. I've enjoyed so many. There's several that kind of resonate that stuck with me after the fact, and one of them was the episode about the pastor that then kind of, not late in life, but much later than a person normally. 39, I think he said, became a police officer, and I was just floored by that. I kept putting myself in the mind of that person and imagining what I would do. I'm 36 right now when we're recording this. I can't imagine being 3 years older than being like, well, it's time to go to Marine Corps boot camp. That's kind of what he did. And, that drive, that calling that he kept talking about having, and it kept coming back to him, and how he's discussing things. I think he said his wife had a fear and a loathing of going to Southern California. And then he was like, at the point when she said, let's go down there, he's like, well, it must be, she's getting, the call, because this is a place she's never wanted to be. But that perspective, and then, working in a bad part of Los Angeles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Los Angeles listeners, but I'm not a fan of your city. Every time I've been in Los Angeles, I just want to get out. The traffic is terrible. But yeah, imagining working in a tough part of downtown Los Angeles, that's got to be a place that you can really feel like a police officer.
Well, Jim Spellman's a great guy, and I was so pleased that when I started the podcast, I thought, I'm going to get Jim, because I knew that he had just become a cop. And I'm like, I've got to get his perspective, because it's just like that TV show, The Rookie. Mm-hmm. And so this is too perfect. And of course, as soon as I asked, Jim's like, how can I help you? I'd be happy to. Let me find a day where I can lock myself in a closet and talk to you on the phone and do this interview. And he was just fantastic. It was really good.
It was a great interview. I was just captivated the whole time listening to his story. I just found it so interesting. It was a good one.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too.
So we've talked about maybe your favorite episode. And like you said, you'd hate to pick one, but if you had to. But, is there, as a person recording, the show and going through and meeting people and doing things, I'm sure in your mind you've got a plan. Like, this is a topic area I want to cover. This is something I want to do. This is something I want to bring to the listener. Have there been any episodes that have surprised you? And maybe you got something out of it that you didn't expect you would?
Yeah. Well, most of them I learned something, for sure. But the one that surprised me most was Ginger Mama Passarelli in episode 10. She actually, I didn't know that I knew her already because she lived in Seattle at the time, and she had reached out to me on Facebook, and I had just produced a little bit of Chaplain stuff on YouTube, kind of practicing for this, because I worked up to this podcast. It took me a year to work up to it. And so I was kind of learning, kind of, making my mistakes and whatever. And I put out this little video, and I got immediately negative, criticism about it. And like, oh, this is stupid. Why are you doing this? And you made a mistake, and you should have done it this way. And I'm like, man, I'm learning here.
Yeah, of course.
And Mama Passarelli reached out to me on Facebook and said, I thought your video was great.
Oh.
Don't listen to those people. And I ended up having a whole conversation with her on Facebook Messenger, and then forgot who that was. And so months later, I'm like, I'm starting a podcast. Hey, anybody in this Chaplain Facebook group, if you want to help, just let me know. She's like, I'll be on your show.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, oh, who are you again? And I didn't realize who it was.
Yeah.
And so she agreed. I started doing my homework on her and figured out, okay, this is what she does. She do Mike Rowe and had been on TV several times.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay, so she's been interviewed before. And I thought, so I better do my homework. And so I brushed up, and I did my interview with her over the phone. And she was so wonderful, and she's just the most lovable person in the world.
Oh, yeah.
And charming and friendly and just fantastic. And it was only later then, after I fell in love with the ministry that she does, where she's taking food out to first responders, fighting forest fires and SWAT teams that are on scene,
mudslides and
everything. She's doing all that hard work and started this incredible nonprofit. And I became a huge fan, and then realized, I actually met her online like a year ago, and I didn't. It was only at that point that I realized that I had already met her before, and I told her about that later. And I'm like, I'm so sorry I didn't recognize who you were.
Yeah.
But I was so delighted, and I think several listeners have come back and said, well, I wasn't really expecting to like that episode, and I really enjoyed it.
Hi, I'm one of them. I was looking at that episode, and you get your podcasts on, but I get mine, and I have the list of the titles of the shows, and I saw that one. I'll admit, I wasn't super excited about it, but when I sat down and listened to it, it was awesome. Well, number one, it made me hungry when she was telling that she was telling the story about the little boy that's like, when she was deciding she didn't want to do it anymore, and then he's like, hey, what are you gonna make soup tomorrow? And she's like, well, what's your favorite? And then he was like, I think he said like beef and barley or something. And I was just like, that sounds like a really good soup. I'm hungry now.
Yeah.
So not only did I enjoy the episode, but it also made me hungry for soup.
Yeah.
But no, it was awesome. She was talking about all the things she does.
Yeah.
And I think she was mentioning how a lot of other unnamed groups won't come out unless something's going on for more than a day or something.
Yeah.
That's not the case with them. And I was like, that's awesome. And then another thing that stuck to me was when she was talking about being in the Pacific Northwest and, riots and unrest and Antifa, and how at one point somebody called her and said, hey, soup ladies, you got to scoot, Antifa's rolling on the way. And she said they missed them by a couple minutes.
Had to get a police escort out of town.
Yeah, that's not a joke. You watch the riots and the footage of the unrest up there, and Antifa's a whole nother monster, and it's tough. I can't imagine, she's talking about people threatening her life, and who'd want to, she just seemed like a wonderful person.
She is.
She seemed like a sweetheart. I'd like to meet her.
Do you have anything that surprised you?
Yeah. The clown in jail, Gassy the clown. I was completely surprised by that. I was like, a clown in jail, what's this going to be about? And then listening to his story, not only his length of time in corrections, which right now I'm going to tell you that is a job that I cannot do.
Yeah.
Joe Grasela cannot do corrections. And, I grew up in Leavenworth, Kansas, which has about 50 million different prisons and detention facilities, right?
Yep.
And I have a bunch of friends that growing up, their fathers were corrections officers, and then now they have become corrections officers. I could not do that job. And listening to him talking about his experiences and things that he's done And then throwing that whole, like, I'm a clown part, like, that was wild. The story where he was talking about bringing the I think it was CS gas canisters
Yeah.
because of a riot in the jail while wearing full clown regalia was a hoot. He seemed like a cool guy.
He is. He's a sweetheart. He's just a wonderful guy. And I wish more people, I don't know if I should go back and rename that episode or advertise it differently or whatever, but I wish more people would listen to it because it is a sweet story. He's a great, just another really great person I was able to interview.
Not only that, but just his descriptions of like working in an old jail that was like a linear jail. And I didn't even think about things like, the kind of the progression and development of, corrections as a police officer.
He called that old style predator controlled.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's...
Well, and, I went to college and studied sociology and criminology, and there is a ton of victimization in prison environments.
Sure.
People that go into prisons and have crimes committed against them is very common. Yeah. And when he was describing that linear jail and not having sight lines on people and kind of just walking up and seeing things as they've already happened or currently in the act, whereas the more open pod style environment seems, for face value, much more dangerous, right? You're putting one deputy or one jailer or one corrections officer in a pod with maybe 50 plus people. We're like, whoa, that seems scary. But the way he described it, it made sense to me.
Yeah,
and
he did a good job.
One thing that, police departments and policing in general kind of develops and things change and there's new theories and new ways of doing things. You kind of forget that they do that in jail or corrections environments too. So that was kind of cool to me. I was really surprised by that episode and really ended up enjoying it.
Yeah, I'm glad.
So, we've talked about maybe a favorite. Maybe we've talked about an episode that surprised you. Have there been any that were really hard to record or maybe difficult to get through, that were just tough emotionally, or maybe they were just something about them just wasn't easy for you to get through?
Well, there's several answers for that. For the most part, most of my episodes are pretty well controlled. I make sure that I'm recording at a time where I'm probably not going to get interrupted, and I have most of my technical stuff pretty well prepared.
So what you're saying is you don't order a pizza before you start recording?
No, right? Yeah,
bummer. I was hoping for a pizza to come.
But but I had one where I did the entire episode and it didn't get recorded.
Ooh.
And so I had to go back and it was a telephone interview, and I had to go back and redo it.
Oh, how do you tell the person, like, hey, by the way, that last 30 to 40 minutes of your life completely have to be redone?
That was awful. And that individual was incredibly gracious and was like, well, we had a practice run. And I'm like, well, God bless you, because I am mortified that didn't get recorded. And so that was wonderful. But this one of my most recent episodes, the episode about the bagpipes.
Oh, that's great. That's a good one. Band.
Oh my goodness, the worst recording conditions ever. There were other people in the building. They were doing construction. At one point, a shop vac was turned on in the very next room. And it's like, no.
Shop vac is almost like the bagpipe of vacuum devices. It commands your attention.
Of all garage tools, that is the bagpipe.
I like that in your outro of that episode. You're like, the bagpipe commands your attention.
Yes, it does.
You can't talk over it. Well, you can't talk over a shop vac either.
No, and it just ruined a whole chunk of that recording. And there were construction noises and voices in the background the whole time, which I took out most of it. But that was so much work to even make it listenable, and still every time I did that left an artifact, and so you can hear a change in like the tone of my voice, the quality of my voice as it goes from a piece that was edited to a piece that wasn't edited. Because when it all got normalized and leveled out, then you can hear the difference.
Yes,
and I hate that. I hate it.
As a listener, I can tell you I didn't really pick up much of that at all. I thought it sounded great, but as a person that's crafting it, I can see from your perspective how agonizing that must be to get it right. And then
I'd give
you hear
my
every
left arm
foible.
to have had those guys. They did such a good job, and I if they could have been here on a day where there wasn't interruptions, that would have been better.
Yeah. Just improvise, adapt, overcome. You got to just keep driving on. So
exactly. Yeah. So there were a handful of those where I had difficulty. I had to overcome some sort of obstacle. Maybe the hardest emotionally was the first Concerns of Police Survivors episode.
Yeah, it was tough for me to listen to.
It was tough because I had two different people telling their stories of loss.
Yeah.
And I put a disclaimer on that episode because I know listening to it as I was doing it, it was affecting me.
Yeah.
And Teresa's story, I mean, even though, her brother passed almost 20 years ago.
Wow.
And
you couldn't tell that by her voice.
It was so real to her,
yeah.
like recent to her.
Oh, it felt like it happened yesterday listening to her. That was awful.
It tore my heart out.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That was very difficult. And we didn't pause a lot. We did once, just to kind of take a break.
Yeah.
And of course, Officer Darrenfeld, he handled it like a pro and was very professional.
And he
very tactful with how much information he gave.
I know him. He's a good friend of mine, and he is that way. And I can tell you, when he first came on, sorry, Dustin, I was his sergeant, and he would be so formal in how he interacted with people.
Right.
His vibe was very formal, and he wasn't trying to come across as a person like that, but just very formal. Yeah.
That's a good quality when you're talking about people who've lost their loved ones in the line of duty. Yeah. Being able to have kind of a funeral director's demeanor. That's what I have to do when I'm conducting a funeral.
Yeah.
That's not a bad trait.
No,
and he does a good job as the president of the Kansas chapter.
Oh, he's great.
I like that. He's a good fit for that.
Yeah. As difficult of an episode as that was to listen to, even for me personally, because he was describing loss that I've also experienced. That was tough, but getting to hear about all the good that their organization does for Kansas, as well as so many other states in our country, they are a group that's there for you on your worst day. When you lose that loved one or that member of your family that has given their life doing something, they're there for you. And when he described, other people show up and other people support you, which is great. We want that. But then there comes a point where that kind of stops for whatever reason. Maybe it's after the funeral. Maybe it's after things calm down. That media attention goes away a little bit. But they're still there for you after the fact. Yeah. And they keep bringing you that support and that love, which is so crucial.
And I didn't know that. I wasn't very familiar with Concerns of Police Survivors before I did these interviews. And so I only had a vague idea of what they did. And the idea that they kept coming back to those families and kept ministering to them long term really touched me because when we have a loss, we live with it for years, especially that first year with the first Thanksgiving, the first Christmas, the first, birthday that goes by. We suffer through that. But everybody else had permission to move on at the funeral.
Right.
And so really within that first week, everyone else has moved on, but not you, the person grieving.
Yeah.
And so the fact that Concerns for Police Survivors comes back and circles back around and does things to, they offer retreats and these other activities and ways to be involved and help others. And there's like this whole process over years
and I
that a survivor can participate in. I think that's awesome.
They talked even about it was like, I don't know if catered's the right word, but they would do like if you lost your husband or your wife, they would put you with other people that lost a spouse.
Yes,
if you lost
they'd match you up with people who had the same kind of loss.
Yeah, so you can relate and empathize in a whole nother way that, I think one of them said like a lot of people won't understand this the way that, you need to, get that out and grieve the way that you need to grieve. And I think at one point somebody described like, losing a spouse and maybe getting ready for the funeral, going through all these emotions, but like you're still helping. Maybe you've got family from out of town that's here to help you grieve, but you don't get that grieving process because you're trying to help everyone else, and people need that opportunity and they're there to help you with that. And taking people to get to the police memorial in Washington, D.C. And I even said like, maybe that year of maybe you're not ready for it, but we'll get you there 2 years after if you are.
Right.
And, I liked how Teresa said, I'll be there for you, and I know when to walk away and let you have your time to yourself too. Yeah. Just things that are just so crucial that you could tell that it mattered so much to them that just listening to that, it resonated with me going, I am so thankful people like that are here for us. And I'm sorry that they had to have that trauma and that grief, but I'm so happy that they're able to then in turn take that grief and do something positive with it for other people.
Yeah. Well, it made such an impression on me, it led to my first sequel. And so I had my second person named Ginger, which I don't know if I had very many people in my life named Ginger, but on my podcast, I've already interviewed two, and also my second with Concerns of Police Survivors.
Yeah.
So Ginger Howell.
Oh, that was a great one too.
Out in
Nevada.
Texas. Well, she's from Texas, but she's in Nevada
In Nevada now, that's right.
Yeah, and oh my goodness, she was just a fount of information. She knows what she's talking about. She's an experienced chaplain. She has gone to trial with the surviving family of officers who've been killed and their murderers on trial, and that specifically is what I wanted to talk to her about. But really, she gave me so much other good information. I mean, the trial part ended up being a small part of the episode because she just had all this other great stuff to tell. Yeah.
No, it's one of those things where as a listener of the show, I could see how, maybe somebody's listening to your show that knows somebody that has lost someone, or they're in law enforcement, or they're in the fire service, or they're EMS or whatever. And they know, maybe they haven't experienced that, but maybe there is somebody in their agency that has. And now, thanks to that episode, maybe they're able to know of somebody to get them in touch with to get that help. So that's awesome.
Yeah. I am glad to promote them. My podcast is not monetized. I'm not trying to make any money. I'm spending money to do this.
No monetization?
No.
We're not hitting up that Patreon? Let's go.
Every day I get emails for how to monetize my podcast, and I am not interested. It's not what I'm doing.
We're not going to break the show midway to talk about how we can get our hair regrown.
No. Oh, my goodness. Yeah, we can, buy a mattress or something.
Right.
No. And specifically, I don't want to make money off of this relationship that I have as an active chaplain with this department, because a lot of what I do comes from this department, for the podcast. I don't want to be making money off of them that way.
Yeah, I can see that.
And so I need to keep that relationship pure,
of course,
with no ulterior motives or anything like that. So I'm not going to monetize the podcast, but boy, I'm happy to promote other, charities and nonprofits and even businesses that help with the with the law enforcement community.
Speaking of that, you have had some episodes like Cops and some other things where you've talked about charities. Have they had any success or any help as a result of being on the show?
I haven't had huge amounts of feedback. I mean, people respond to me on my Facebook page, and I get people that email me, and of course, people who are guests kind of become friends, and so that's not unusual to get that feedback. But the best feedback that I've gotten has been the Cops. The first Cops episode, they got donations to that chapter of Cops because of the podcast.
That makes me feel warm in my heart because money that people are donating is directly helping the state that I serve in. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that is the best possible outcome from a podcast like this, is that people are helping out an organization like Concerns of Police Survivors or any of the others that I'm promoting and trying to help and that kind of thing. Give them some advertising.
No, that's awesome. You do have a platform with your show,
right?
International, right? I mean, you've got people listening from all over the world.
20 different countries.
That's awesome. I'll get on my soapbox and rant a little bit, is all the negatives of social media, all the negatives of the internet, but there's a whole lot of positive too. Yeah. And podcasts, the format, I guess if we can call it that, allows for people to really, put stuff out there that people can listen to. And I'm sure that there's a lot of people getting a lot of benefit from your show. I know I do. I'm not kidding. I love the show. I listen to it. Even to something as just hearing your voice, you've got this big booming voice that just instantly when I hear that, it just calms me down. And I'm just like, all right, cool.
Thank you for noticing, Joe.
Yeah. There's something about that though, that it is comforting to me listening to it. But your episodes have such a varied, kind of topics and subjects and stuff that you've covered. It's cool. It's just, you don't know what you're going to get. It's like, what's the next episode going to bring?
I've got all kinds of stuff coming up.
All right, so let's talk about it. Let's do it. Let's go.
I can't commit to
future show list. Let's get it next year in the can. What do we got coming? I'm ready for it.
I do have several episodes in the can. I am making an effort to reach out to people across the country, especially East Coast. I have some that are coming that direction. Also, continuing to look at other agencies.
Okay.
There are several law enforcement jobs that I just have not touched on.
So that's a good point, because I've learned a lot. TICTA?
Yeah.
What was that?
No one knew what TICTA was.
Nobody knew what that was. Okay, I've heard of the U.S. Marshal Service. I've heard of them.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, some of these other agencies that are out there, that was really cool. Like I learned a lot about other agencies, and I'd love to hear more of that.
Yeah, well, there will be some federal agencies and some state agencies. There'll be some of that coming down the road.
Okay.
I am working on another Concerns of Police Survivors episode. So there'll be a trilogy.
The trilogy
of episodes.
Return of the Cops. Yeah.
I want to go. It'll be a prequel, right? Because I want to go back to their origins.
Oh, okay.
The Concerns of Police Survivors started in Missouri.
Really? I didn't know that.
So that is just down the road from me.
That's
and
right.
I am going to get the original founders.
That's cool.
I'm working on that right now, and I'm optimistic I can make that happen eventually, but no timeline for that. I can't promise when.
Sorry,
when
folks.
that'll happen. Right. But I have several
Put
others.
the calendars away.
And there's a few, like any good fisherman, there's a few that got away.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really hoping to double back on some of those. There were some ideas I had on day one for I want this as an interview in my podcast that have not happened yet.
Okay.
And maybe the first person I asked just didn't have the courage to try this, maybe.
Yeah.
And others, it just didn't work out. And I'm really optimistic that some really unique roles within law enforcement, I can talk to them, and then also some unique issues. I'm wanting to talk about things like moral injuries.
Oh.
I'd like people to have that in their vocabulary and understand what a moral injury is. And I have an expert from California that I'm hoping to get on the show.
I would love to hear that because I don't know what that is. Right. I'll be tuning into that one.
Yeah. And so lots of great ideas. I have been blessed with a large number of law enforcement friends, and between my contacts and then all of their contacts, almost everybody I've interviewed has said, well, hey, you really should talk to so-and-so. And so I have a list where I could do this podcast for years before I exhaust the list that I already have.
Good problem to have.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I like that there are other law enforcement podcasts out there, but there are hardly any active law enforcement chaplain podcasts. I think there's some military chaplain podcasts. There's some other law enforcement podcasts, but I'm kind of by myself in this niche. And I feel like my show was designed to have a pretty wide net of topics and things to talk about, just trying to provide wisdom and support and encouragement.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm real optimistic about how far I can go with this.
Yeah. So. No, sky's the limit. I've listened to the show, and then I've got friends that I can, I've told about the show, are able to discuss it and talk about it. And you create things to discuss, right?
I hope so.
It's like having a book club, right? We could have the Hey Chaplain podcast club, where we could have another show that's offset of this one, where we come around in a round table and discuss your episode and what we learned from it.
Yeah. Did you hear about the one with the guy in the motorcycle accident, or the guy that was a paramedic that became, got put in with the SWAT team or whatever? Go. Right. Yeah. And people like to talk about it.
Yeah.
And that's good. My audience is supposed to be law enforcement family, and chaplains. But I'm finding that a lot of my listeners are not in the law enforcement community.
Really?
And there are several people that are like, I just like your show. Yeah, I just had a guy from England tell me that the other day, and I can't quote him or do his accent.
Right.
But he told me in a very delightful accent that that he just thought it was interesting.
That's another thing to think about too, is I would love for me, the listener, to get a perspective of law enforcement in other countries.
Yep.
There's a different way of doing things. I had an opportunity this week where I had people from Armenia that were police officers in their country ride with me for a couple of days, and they wanted to see how we did policing in the United States, and specifically in Kansas.
Right.
And by doing that, I got to listen and understand and learn so much about their country, so much about their issues, so much about how they do business and their goals and aspirations for the future. And getting that international perspective, I think, is cool. I would like to see you get some international guests on here to talk about policing in other countries.
I would love that. But I do need help, connecting with those people.
What's the best way to, be able to do that? Is there a way that you think would be effective?
If you don't already have contact with me, the best way is probably through the Hey Chaplain Facebook page.
Okay.
And so I'm not married to Facebook, but right now it's a pretty useful tool for me.
Okay.
A lot of people are finding the podcast that way. And I am getting good feedback that way. People are able to get on Facebook and message the page or me as an individual. And so that'd be a very accessible way to get a hold of me. But if you can find me, I'm not hidden. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me other places where it's possible to private message me. And boy, if you have an encouraging word of wisdom about law enforcement, I don't need you to have a particularly unique story. I'm sure that I can use you as a interview subject or as like part of a compilation of firsthand accounts or something. I think everybody has something to offer, and I would love to hear about it. And as long as people understand this, these episodes have a long lead time. And so a lot of these people that you hear interviewed are being interviewed 1, 2, or 3 months before it actually drops.
What you're telling me is you're not recording this the day before it airs?
No, this is not me burning the midnight oil the night before. No, this is often several weeks ahead, a long lead time, because it's not my primary job. I mean, my primary job is the church, and so if something comes up in the church, I have to attend to that first, and I want to. That's a job I love.
Yeah.
And then working as an actual chaplain is probably my foremost side gig. Again, not paid, but it's a thing that I spend some time with.
Of course.
And then podcasting comes behind that. And so that's why I don't publish every day or every week, because there is not enough time. I would have to give up being a chaplain to do that. And I
can't do that.
Nope. This is the right pace for my show.
Yeah.
Just about twice a month, more or less.
And I think that's fair. I mean, hearing you describe like the things that you have to do to get a show ready.
Yes.
I don't know if I'd want you putting out more than 2, because I want a happy chaplain coming to my crime scenes. I don't want a grumpy, tired, sad chaplain. So
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, it's been a good show. I'm very interested in what the future will bring. I think that you have done so much already in, let's be honest, a relatively short amount of time.
Yeah, about 7 months.
Yeah. So I really mean it. Like, the sky's the limit. I want to see what you got. I want to see what you keep bringing. Your production values are so good.
Well,
listening to the show, it sounds like you're like a professional radio engineer. And it's good. It's a good show. I'm curious of what the future will bring. I want to hear, once again, let's get that international guest on here.
Yeah.
I want a London Metropolitan Police officer telling us about life in the big city.
What about Johannesburg?
Oh, man, Joburg,
that might be
Pretoria.
That might be a possibility. Yeah. I will have to reach out and see if I can find somebody. That's
Policing is a whole other world in South Africa.
Yeah.
So that would be awesome. And probably one of the coolest accents on the planet.
It is. It really is. Everybody's like, are you from New Zealand?
Yeah.
No. It's South Africa. It's
kind of German, kind of Dutch, kind of English.
Yeah, a little bit of everything.
A little bit of everything, yeah. So that's a great accent. But no, I'm so thankful that you had me on the show.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun to be a listener that gets to be on the show and act as sort of a co-host, if you will. So
yeah.
I'm really thankful that you gave me this opportunity.
Well, I'm happy to have you as a co-host. And this month, you've already appeared twice, and you've got an upcoming episode as a guest. I mean, you'll have 3 appearances.
I'll be waiting for my royalty
by
checks.
January. That's right. You'll get a high percentage of 0.
All right.
Yes.
Nice.
But I'd be happy to have you back again.
I'd really appreciate that.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good job, Joe. Go ahead and do the outro.
If you liked what you heard here, please share this episode with a cop or someone who loves a cop. The views expressed here are the personal views of the host, me, and our guest, the chaplain, and do not necessarily represent the views of any law enforcement agency or its components. Thank you for listening today, and as always, pray for peace in our city.